Hello everybody, welcome back to Quick Lessons U.S. History. I'm Lorenzo Poto, here to talk to you about post-war of 1812. After the War of 1812, the United States sees a fall of the Federalist Party, due to effects of the war and the disapproval of the nation during a convention made up of mostly Federalists indicating New England's potential secession from the Union and the creation of a separate peace with Great Britain. Now, through this Federalist collapse, there's an emergence of a new party, the National Republican Party. Similar to the Federalist Party, the National Republican Party favored all of the same ideals as the Federalists, such as a strong centralized government, industrial economy, etc. However, the basic difference, in my eyes, is that the National Republicans also advocated for internal improvements within the nation, such as the building of the Erie Canal and the Cumberland Road. The National Republicans, however, were not the only political group in the nation at this time period. In fact, the Democratic Republicans, the very same group who were present prior to the War of 1812, started by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, were present at this time period as well. The United States, after the War of 1812, faced several ideological, social, and economic problems. These problems included regionalism, slavery, agriculture versus industry, national bank, gold versus paper currency, and a lack of a central army. The National Republicans and the Democratic Republicans would have most likely agreed on gold currency in regards to whether advocating for paper currency or gold currency in regards to like payment and investment system for the new nation. And they would have also agreed on the expansion westward in order to gain new resources and more power for the United States overall. More land basically means more power. However, both parties did not agree on everything, obviously, or else there wouldn't have been two parties and just one. The National Republicans would have favored a central army in order to combat future invasions due to the fear of anything like the War of 1812 to happen anytime soon again. They would have also favored the abolishment of slavery due to moral reasons and potential power shift to the South, due to the fact that the National Republicans, well, the majority of them were in the North and the majority of the slaves were in the South. They would have also favored internal improvements, giving more power to a centralized authority, such as the building of the Erie Canal or the Cumberland Road, as I said before, or even how the Democratic Republicans, under Thomas Jefferson, bought Louisiana from the French, seen in the Louisiana Purchase. They would have also favored the implementation of the National Bank, due to the fact that they are an industrial party favoring a strong centralized government, which is what the National Bank would do. And they would have also favored the idea of a shift from an agrarian nation to an industrial one. The Democratic Republicans, on the other hand, would have favored the exact opposite. Overall, I would have to agree with the National Republicans and their viewpoints and choices, saying that the United States would not be nearly what it is today economically and even technologically if it had not been for a strong centralized government to guide the nation towards progress and the ability to trade with foreign investors, allowing us to obtain a variety of different resources that weren't accessible domestically and even aren't accessible domestically today. In regards to a central army, the National Republicans wanted it because after the War of 1812, they felt there was a need to have a central army to combat future invasions and wars. The Democratic Republicans were frightful of giving that power to the central government. That would expand the power of the national government if they were able to formulate a national army. And so their fear was that the government might use that army to force states to comply with national laws. Slavery. Now, Democratic Republicans wanted slavery, because that was the base of the agricultural economy of the farmers, seeing that the majority of the population in the South consisted of slaves. So it would make sense that a huge factor of the agricultural economy in the South was slavery. However, National Republicans did not want slavery, because they were located in Massachusetts and other religious northern states. The National Republicans, of course, located in that area, and they saw slavery as immoral and wrong. And they also saw slavery as holding back the economy, because it didn't promote innovation or progress. It was just straight agricultural labor. The American system was based on high tariffs, national bank, and internal improvements at this time period. So in regards to regionalism, the American system would give power to the central government to make internal improvements in states. However, it wasn't with the states' approval, which would anger the Democratic Republicans, saying that they advocate for states' rights and that the National Republicans advocated for a strong centralized authority. The National Republicans advocated for a national bank, which we'll talk about later in regards to gold currency, but for now, they wanted it to control the economy. The Democratic Republicans did not want a centralized authority that would lean to the industrial side, so they disagreed with having a national bank. Agriculture versus industry is quite simple, seeing that the Democratic Republicans were made up of mostly farmers, so they would want an agrarian system instead of an industrial economy, and on the other hand, the National Republicans would want an industrial economy, seeing that they're made up of mostly merchants, bankers, and other high elite positions in society, and they would not want an agricultural system. Similarly, both parties favored gold currency. They both wanted money based on gold because the Democratic Republicans saw it as a stable money source. They would want it controlled by multiple banks so that the farmers, which were the dominant faction in the Democratic Republican Party, could choose which loan they wanted. They did not want one central bank that can control the gold and bring in a lot of foreign investors, which would move the economy and control to more of an industrial side. The National Republicans wanted the national bank to control the gold, which would control the economy essentially. This would attract foreign investors to invest in industry and move the economy to the industrial side, which would benefit the majority of the National Republicans because they were merchants, industrialists, and Eastern bankers primarily. However, both parties still wanted gold currency. Also, in regards to Western expansion, the Democratic Republicans wanted to expand west to make more agricultural land so that there would be more farmers and that Democratic Republicans would be elected for the next 20 or so years. It would also give the common farmer more power. Nationalist Republicans wanted to expand west in order for newly obtained raw materials that could travel to the East Coast through internal improvements such as the Erie Canal in order to better the economy. So, after all this jibber-jabber, information on the similarities and differences between these two parties, who would I end up favoring? Well, of course, I would still side with the National Republicans, because they favored the abolition of slavery, they favored economic and industrial progress, which is the very reason I'm able to make this video to you in the first place, and they also favored the idea of a central army in order to protect ourselves as a nation from future invasions, which is apparent today, seeing that we are the world's most powerful army, navy, Air Force, and Marines. Whether you favor one side more than the other is all based on your own interpretation. This was Quick Lessons U.S. History with Lorenzo Poto. Thanks for coming, and see you next week.